Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this webinar. My name is David Mulder and I'm going to be taking you through the Merlin Universal Indicator today, and we're going to be having a look at some of its main features and how to set it up. But before we get going, I'll just check that everyone can hear me and that we're all good to go. So if you can hear me, just type a comment in the box. You can use the question window at the right of your screen at any point during the presentation to ask a question, and if you'd like to leave a question, I'll endeavour to get to them at the end of the presentation. Okay, great. So let's get started. This presentation is going to take about half an hour, and hopefully you'll learn a lot about the Merlin, and you'll be familiar with it and able to use it at the end of it. So this is the Merlin. As you can see, it's a small panel mount indicator. It's very flexible, and we've designed it to be used in an industrial environment. It has a 4-digit LED display with configurable decimal point options, and you can programmably change the scaling for the display as well. The display can be easily configured to show a scaled version of the input signal. So that means you can show a value that is more meaningful for you in your process. So rather than showing raw voltage, for example, you can show temperature or flow rate in liters per minute. So we're going to have a look at some of its more interesting features, like the universal input, universal power supply, the optional relays, and the 4 to 20 milliamp loop outputs. For those of you that require UL registered equipment in your projects, this product is also perfect for you. The Merlin fits into a standard 96 by 48 millimeter panel mount cutout. What sets it apart from many other products is its short case depth. It only requires 80 millimeters of space behind the panel to have enough room for the instrument and all of the connectors. We do also supply mounting brackets with the Merlin, and all the mounting hardware fits behind the panel, so it's a nice clean install. When you properly install the Merlin, it's rated for IP65, making it suitable for harsh environments. The most significant feature of the Merlin by far is its universal input. The inputs are all fully isolated for precise signals and ease of setting the device up. Each range comes pre-calibrated from the factory, enabling you to configure the unit without having a sensor present. It accepts temperature signals from all common thermocouple types, as well as 3-wire RTD and NTC temperature sensors. The Merlin also accepts 0 to 20 and 4 to 20 milliamp inputs and 0 to 10 volt input signals from process outputs from other equipment. The voltage input can also be configured in many different ranges, from as small as plus or minus 200 millivolts all the way up to 300 volts DC. On top of these, the Merlin also has a digital pulse input that can be used with pulse signals from devices such as flow sensors, and has a working range from 0 to 2 kilohertz. It also has a potentiometer range for use with ratiometric sensors, and for measuring high current signals, it can be paired with one of our optional external AC current sensors. The power supply on the Merlin supports a wide operating range, allowing you to operate the same unit from either 20 volts DC or AC main supply with no reconfiguration of the unit. Being able to use this wide range in one model means that you aren't going to have to worry about blowing up the unit by putting the AC mains into a low voltage only model. This also makes it simpler to install in unknown systems, as you can connect the unit to almost any available power source without having to worry about picking the right unit beforehand. The Merlin also can provide 22 volt excitation to sensors. This is fully isolated from the AC and DC main supply, and is ideal to use if you're going to use the Merlin with loop-powered transmitters or other sensors. The Merlin also has flexible outputs as an optional extra. The output is a 4 to 20 milliamp loop output that is active. This means that the power for the loop is coming from the Merlin itself, so you don't need any external power supplies to power your sensor loop. The output mirrors the value that is shown on the display, and it can be rescaled to anything that you like. So for example, you can set it so that when the display shows 0, the output is 4 milliamps, and when the display shows 100, the output is 20 milliamps. Or conversely, you could set that so it shows so it's 4 milliamps when the display shows 100 and 20 when that's 0, or any other combination you can think of. It's also available with two normally open relays. The relays have multiple operating modes and can be configured independently from each other or set up into special linked modes such as pump alternation control mode. We're going to have a look at this mode and some of the other modes later on in the presentation. In fact, the nice thing about the Merlin is the only ordering option you have to worry about when you're choosing your Merlin is whether or not you want to have relays and the analog output present. The other version is an indicator-only version, and this is the only thing you have to choose. Everything else is universal and reconfigurable with the Merlin. One of the really nice things about having a simple indicator is that no one needs to change any settings once it's installed. In fact, normally you would have to find a way to prevent users from accidentally reconfiguring the unit into the wrong mode. For peace of mind, the Merlin is an excellent choice because there are no buttons to press, and the only way to change its settings is to connect it to the computer and use our easy-to-use configuration software. The Merlin does have an optional input switch connector on the rear of the unit that is fitted on models that have the relays and analog output installed. This switch is used to reset relays when they are set up in a latching mode. It's also useful in situations where you want a manual reset of the alarm. The manual reset disables the alarm until the unit has returned to its no-fault state. This is great for silencing an annoying buzzer. The switch can also be used as a manual 0. When you enable this mode and press the button, the current input signal will be used as a reference point. The display then changes and temporarily will now show all measurements from the relative point when you push the 0. So to get your head around that, a common example of this is if you were to use the tare button on your kitchen scales so that you can zero out the weight of a bowl before you pour things in onto the scales. The Merlin is very quick and easy to set up. You don't even need a power supply to configure it. You just use the USB bridge key that's pictured down there in the left hand corner of the slide, and that powers it from the computer. Do keep in mind that when you are using the USB to power the Merlin, the majority of the functions will all operate as normal, but the 4 to 20 milliamp output won't operate and the excitation won't be available for sensors. However, you can still configure the 4 to 20 milliamp output. The software allows you to enter in all the parameters, and it gives you a simulated value for what the output would be if you had the power connected. One of the nice things about the ToolBox software is that you don't need to leaf through a long and complicated manual to set up the unit. We've designed it to be really simple to use. You don't have to decipher any cryptic menus or memorize impossible button combinations for your unit either. Most things we've made are really intuitive, and if you do find things confusing, the built-in help pane will always update depending on what you click on, and it will show you the relevant information that you need to know right there on screen as you need it. So let's have a look at some application examples, and then I'll take you through the software and I'll show you how easy it is to use. So our first example where the Merlin is a great solution is for an alarm application. So let's say we have a motor in a factory that is running some process, and it's critical to make sure that it doesn't overload and it doesn't get too hot because it will wear out too fast. So the Merlin is an ideal choice because it allows us to have the operator check the display and they can see the temperature of the motor. We can also set up set points on the Merlin to react to the temperature of the motor and perform different control actions. So for example, we might be using a thermocouple sensor to measure the motor temperature, and then we can use the relay 1 on the Merlin as a trigger for a siren and a warning light when the temperature exceeds 80 degrees C. And then we can also use the second relay to cut power to the motor when the temperature exceeds a critical limit of 100 degrees C. So if the motor reaches 80 degrees C and nothing happens, it keeps getting hotter, then the Merlin can eventually act as a safety cutout. The other nice thing about the relays is they are normally open, which means that when the unit is unpowered and in its passive state, the relays will not be closed. So if you use the relay as an enable, then you can also prevent the motor from running without the controller plugged in. In this scenario, we'd also be using the 4 to 20 milliamp output from the relay, from the Merlin, to go to a control room PLC system. So that control room PLC system might be actively monitoring or logging the temperature of the motor, and might even be controlling some other element in the process to lower the load on the motor and help to bring the temperature back down again. Another feature that we might use on the Merlin in this application is the manual reset switch that we mentioned earlier. This could be used to silence only the alarm on the first relay without interfering with the function of the second relay. So that could be useful for when the motor reaches its critical temperature and then the operator acknowledges the over temperature condition and allows time for the motor to cool down. So then the alarm will turn off, and so it doesn't keep going because it's been acknowledged, and it will reactivate once the motor drops below the safe temperature again. Okay, so let's have a look at another application example. This is the other side of things that the Merlin is often used for. The previous example was an alarm application. This application is a control application. So in this application, the Merlin will actually be directly influencing the system. So this scenario is an industrial plant that is using water from a local river as a cooling supply, and in order to use it, they're pumping it to a tank that is closer to the factory where they're storing the water before it's going out into their plant. So in this scenario, the Merlin is measuring the level in the tank from a 4 to 20 milliamp input, and it's using the two relay outputs to control pump motors to pump water into the tank. Again, we're also going to use the 4 to 20 milliamp retransmission output to go to a control room where someone might be measuring the level of water in the tank, and they can keep an eye on it. Okay, so let's have a look at this one with the ToolBox. I have here the ToolBox software, and I have a Merlin plugged in on my desk. So as you can see, it's a fairly simple software. So the first thing we need to do, I've plugged in the Merlin via USB only. It doesn't need power at this stage, and the ToolBox software will automatically figure out which USB port the Merlin is plugged into. So we just have to press this green connect button here, and it will go away and look for it. Okay, and it's found the Merlin. So this is the basic startup screen. So we can see up here in the right-hand corner a small black box with the numbers in it. That is showing us the current process input from the Merlin. So that's showing 99.9. I've actually got a thermocouple, an RTD sensor in there at the moment. So that's why it's showing 100. So that gives us an up-to-date, a live reading of the Merlin, and it also shows us the set point states. So to set up the Merlin let's go for our application example 2 with the pumps. We're going to set the input into milliamp mode. So I did that by clicking here on the input mode box, and so you can see we've got a range. So we click milliamps, and then you'll notice that straight away the dynamic help content to the right here has changed, and it now has got the 0 to 20 milliamp help text here telling us what the mode does. As I go through and click on more things, this will keep changing, so keep an eye on that. The other thing it does is it shows us here how to use different kinds of transmitters with this milliamp mode, but we're going to use the first option here, which is 4 to 20 milliamps, and that shows us which pins we need to connect into. So we're all ready to go. That's your wiring diagram there, which is available for you later on. So input range, our sensor is a 4 to 20 milliamp sensor. We can adjust the offset, so if there was a bit of error in the probe, we could get rid of that. There's also filter time. We're not going to need that in this application. And we're going to have retransmission so that a display value of 4 milliamps in is 4 milliamps out, and 20 milliamps in is 20 milliamps out. So that's just a very basic setup. You can also see the live trace down the bottom here, which is actually showing the input signal. So if I unplug the input for a minute, you'll see that the signal jumps up, and then when I plug it back in, it'll jump back down again. So that gives you an up-to-date view of what's happening, which is quite useful. The same thing happens for the output as well, shown here in red. Okay, so that's the input setup. So we click apply down the bottom. We can now go to configuring the relays. So if we were just going to use a very simple control mode, let's start with set point 1. So in this mode box, we can choose from control, alarm, and off. So I'll pick control. It's got the second box there is function, which has got energized below, energized above, and then there's some more complicated pump alternation modes, which we'll use in a second, but let's start with a simple one. So let's say we're going to be energized below, because we want the pump to turn on when the water level drops below a certain limit. So we'll select below, and then there's an on value and an off value. So let's say we want the motor to turn on when the level drops below our 6 milliamps, and we want it to turn off again when it gets to 12 milliamps. Now we can set up scaling as well, so we could set up on the input tab the scaling so that we don't have to put milliamp readings in here. So we could set it up and say 4 milliamps is 0 liters and 20 milliamps is 10,000 liters, and then we can do these set up these controls in a liter value in our engineering units, so it's much easier for us to understand. But for the moment, we'll just do it like this, and we click apply. That is now set up and ready to go. So that's the most basic one. You can see here on the right a diagram of how that mode works. Let's have a look at the pump alternation mode, because this is a really neat one that I'd like to show you, because it's quite powerful for this application. So we're going to look at the pump alternation with backup in a fill mode. So that's a lot to get your head around it to start with, but basically what we're going to do in this is we're going to use the two pumps. So we're assuming that the tank has got two pumps, so that the load is shared between them, and if one of the pumps fails, the other one will take over. That's what the backup part of that mode does. So again, we've still got the on value of 6 milliamps. So when the level drops below 6 milliamps, the pump will turn on, and we've got the off value of 12. And what this mode will do for starters is the one pump will turn on, then the next time we go below the limit, the other pump will turn on. But the other feature we can apply on top of that is a backup value. So if I say the pump, whichever pump's turn it is, that has to turn on at 6 milliamps, but if it gets as low as 5 milliamps, then we want the second pump to turn on as well, and that means that the second pump can act to share the load. So if you have a scenario where the load changes sometimes, and most of the time only one pump is enough, but sometimes you need two, then this is ideal for that application. Or if, for example, one of the pumps got blocked, then the second pump would be able to take over. There's also an on and an off value for the backup pump. So at the moment, I've got the backup pump only to turn on between 5 and 6 milliamps. So I can apply that. So there's a little picture down here on the right again as well that explains with lines and colored blocks how that's working. And I encourage you to download this software and have a play with it. Very soon we will be introducing a version of this software that allows you to play around with all these modes without having the Merlin connected. So that will be a great evaluation tool for you to have a look at this product later on. Okay, so we're almost done. You'll also notice that channels 1 and 2 are now on the left here. There's a green box and there's a little link icon there. So the channels 1 and 2 are both used for this mode because obviously one is driving one pump and 2 is driving the other. Okay, another feature that I'd just like to cover in this application to extend it and make it a bit more useful is the linearization. So for a normal shaped tank, a nice upright cylinder, the level will change linearly, so that halfway up the tank is half the volume, and 3/4 up is 3/4 of the volume, and so on. But some tanks aren't that nice. Some tanks would be like a cylinder on its side, in which case halfway or a quarter of the way up the tank is only maybe a sixth of the volume of the tank, and then half is half, and then so it doesn't translate linearly. So you need to do some linearization to account for the shape of the tank. In that case, we can turn on the linearization function. We can click this edit button here, and then the linearization table window pops up, and that lets us enter in a table that allows us to account for the shape of our tank and to adjust the volume accordingly so that it's a bit more accurate for our process. Okay, the only other thing left on the toolbox that's useful for us to look at right now is the Advanced tab, which has got a couple of things which are quite useful for you as well. There's a Create Configuration Certificate button here. This lets you create a nice certificate that's got invoice information, sales information, and then it also comes with the wiring diagrams and a whole lot of other information that can be shipped with the product once it's configured. So if you were, for instance, configuring it for someone else and then distributing it to them, you could supply this certificate with it, and it would give them a good idea of how to wire it up and how the unit's configured. That comes in PDF format. The other two buttons we have here are an import configuration button and an export configuration button. What that lets you do is that is great for troubleshooting tech problems. So if, for example, you've got someone out in the field who is having trouble setting a unit up and you're providing phone support for them, you can set it up yourself and you can do it on your computer on the other side of the world, and you can set all the configuration up. Then you can click the export current configuration button. They will then be able to plug in their Merlin, click the import configuration button, and the configuration will be sucked through and applied to their meter as you had it. Okay, so that's probably covered the toolbox at a whirlwind pace, but as you can see, it's pretty easy to use, and the help content is what makes it a real no-brainer, really, to be honest. Okay, that concludes all the content we have for today. So if anyone has any questions, now would be a great time to whack those up, and we'll have a look at them. Thank you again for coming today. We've appreciated you being here to learn about the Merlin, and we hope that we've been able to help you out and help you understand it better. Yeah, it's a great product, and we're really excited about it, and we think it's very easy to use. So I don't think there's any questions, so we'll end the presentation there, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.